Well, welcome to Krav Life, Coach Blauer. How are you doing today?
I'm good, man. The day for me, I'm of course in a different time zone. I've been getting up really early lately and writing, and something I love to do. And been working on a new project with our and creating a digital instructional book on the SPEAR system. So it's got video, article, photos, and so that's been firing me up and getting up super early. And so I'm already like buzzing. Let's go,
Oh, that sounds exciting. I can't wait for that to come out. I want to check that out.
Yeah.
So let's start kind of at the beginning then, and do kind of a little bit of history on you, like how you started and how it progressed from there into SPEAR and then the No Fear and all the bazillion projects that you have.
Yeah. It's great. I've got different ways that I talk about it. If I'm on a business show, if I'm on a martial arts show, if I'm on a self-help show. In the last couple of years, I've done, I don't even know how many 100 podcasts. And what's fascinating is actually one of the things I was writing this morning for a business project is that I've been an entrepreneur since I'm 17, 1977. And when I first started like trying to find students, and back then it was selfishly, I needed somebody to train with. I lived in the country, and so it wasn't like, a paper route. And then I figured out how to hire some kid and suddenly I'm a manager. It wasn't like that. It was entrepreneurship related to specifically practicing self-defense and understanding. So to answer your question, where did it start? I've always had this obsession with fear and fear of violence and fear of danger. And fear in all things. I mean, I was an all-round athlete growing up, but I was always afraid of the performance. I was afraid to let down my team. I was afraid to let down my parents. I was afraid to, and I always felt like, okay, I'm good. I'm gonna hit the home run here, and I'd be up at bat going, "Don't strike out, don't strike out," And so I always had this bizarre love-hate relationship with fear. So that's important as people understand like where my career took me. I got jumped when I was around 12 by two guys, told my dad about it. And he said, "You got to learn martial arts." I was like, okay. And it was 1972, 73. And so the Bruce Lee craze was just really kind of taken off. Yeah, so I get jumped when I'm around 12. Tell my dad, he goes, "You got to learn self-defense. You got to learn martial arts." I'm like, okay. And there's only one Taekwondo school open in our area. It was just as the Bruce Lee craze was hitting, and Bruce, of course, passed away in 1973. And but the buzz was starting, and then he passed away, and the whole thing erupted. And, everyone became Bruce Lee's biggest fan, of course, and, still to this day, he's a huge influence. But I totally immersed in the self-defense, in the martial arts, in the Taekwondo. I was obsessive with it. I trained every day I could. And I thought like this was my salvation. And in many ways it was. Who I am today is a result of my love and passion for martial arts. Everything that I've built in my company is I can trace back to like that journey, right? I'm still very much a martial artist at heart. Truth, honor, integrity, all of the pillar virtues and stuff like that. One of the areas, and that maybe is another podcast down the road, of just how ironic it is that there's so much bullying, backstabbing, and politics in martial arts for a community and a system that's built on these supposed pillars of integrity, truth, and honor. But that's more of a problem with human beings and human nature in general. But anyways, so for my teens, 1973 to like 1980, just obsessed, training all the time, different confrontations and things during the day. And of course, we're all influenced by the eclectic approach of Jeet Kune Do and Bruce Lee. So I remember getting in a fight in high school, and my opponent had me against the wall, and he's threatening me. And I remember just thinking, he's too close to kick, he's too close to kick, he's too close to kick, because everything I was doing was Taekwondo, Taekwondo, Taekwondo. As an aside, which was interesting, is I'd wrestled for years, competed in wrestling. So I had this wrestling foundation, and now I'm doing the kicking. And I realized in that confrontation that I had no striking, because Taekwondo really, it's back fist to set up your side kick, your round kick, or reverse punch. So I, I started taking up boxing. And by the time I was 20 years old, been wrestling, kicking, boxing, going down to Chinatown, doing different things and training, and just really just totally immersed in it. When I was 15, I was so obsessed with it. I remember my mom asking me, hey, what are you going to study in school? What are you going to be? And I was like, oh, Mom, I'm going to be a famous martial artist like Bruce Lee. I'm going to develop my own self-defense system. School's not going to be important. And she pat me on the head. Sitting on the floor trying to do the splits, looking at Bruce Lee magazine. She says, okay, dear, we'll talk about this when you're older. And that's a true story. That's all, just wasn't interested in all of that. Life has a way of getting in the way of many of our plans, right? And so, suddenly I found myself going out of town to school. I went to Massachusetts, to Springfield College. Then I came back and went to York University. Then I ended up going to work for my father. He lived up in the Laurentians in north of Montreal, and there was no one around there. And so I had to recruit, like I said, people around me wherever I was. When I was, 17, 18, 19, I had to figure out a way to sell why they should train with me and do stuff. So I had sparring partners and training partners, and we used to do like crazy stuff. And I videotaped so much of it. In 1980, I was filming a ton of stuff. Years later, I put together a video called Forging a Fighting System, like a decade later. And I put all these clips, like I had all these like VHS clips. Well, you don't even recognize me, hair and a mullet, like just crazy shit where I'd look at friends and go, why did you let me walk around dressed like that? They go, it was the 80s, man. But anyways, it was a long kind of roller coaster ride, throughout those ages. But the thing that really, I think, was, I guess, an origin story, if you want to call it that, was I was working at my dad's office, and it was 1980-ish, and we used to get in these big pallets and boxes from the Orient. We had a clothing import company, and they were huge, and I used to punch them. Like when we finished unpacking them, I'd beat them up like sides of beef, like Rocky in the Rocky movie. So they were huge. You literally stand in it. So I'd be doing jump back kicks and skip side kicks, and if you hit it good, you'd hear like a real nice auditory pop as the carver broke, because it was so thick. And one day I'm like going ting ting, and I'm nailing the boxes, and I turn around, I feel like there's somebody watching me, and there's one of my dad's clients, this guy Joey, says, hey, and I've known him for years, friend of the family. He goes, hey, you good to see you've been practicing. You're getting good. He says, listen, Mitch is having some bully stuff at school. Would you teach him? And I'm like, sure. Mitch is like this 15-year-old kid. Long story short, I begin doing private lessons with Mitch. Two things happen there. This is 1980. So this is my incubator period. Two things happen. One, 3 months after I started training Mitch, he gets into the fight with the bully. It had just been verbal up till then, just emotional stress. They get into a fight and the kid drops Mitchell. And I feel horrible. I'm like, I trained this kid and he got sucker punched. And he's telling me the story. And he describes it. And we've been like sparring and clinching and boxing and wrestling and doing all like mixed martial arts without knowing it was, what mixed martial arts was, right? We're just like doing stuff one-on-one. And when Mitch tells me the story, he goes, well, he says, the guy tripped him in school and Mitch fell down and he was embarrassed and he got angry and he started swearing and the guy got in his face and, like, what are you talking about? And he says, the guy shoved him. And I told Mitch, you only defend yourself if you get physical. Until then it had been verbal. And when the guy poked him, Mitchell lost it, months of just abuse, and grabbed the guy, slammed him against the locker bank and starts yelling at him. And the guy just left hook. And I said, well, Mitch, why didn't you check it? Why didn't you block it? Why didn't you parry? Why didn't you do any of the stuff we did? And he looks at me, Paul, and he goes, well, he said, I had my school books in my right hand and I was holding them with my left hand. And if you can picture this, like, you have no chance of doing anything. And what we didn't know then, and this is the fascination that I have with the neurobiology of fear, neuroscience, startle flinch, cross-extensor reflex, really what makes Spear Systems such a special approach to enhancing anyone's safety, whether you're doing Krav Maga, jiu-jitsu, Thai boxing, is understanding that neurobiology is part of our physiology and our kinesiology, and it supersedes any complex motor skill we have. So whatever move you're practicing, whatever complex motor skill you're doing, that's part of your executive function, the ability to access that. I'm going off on a mini tangent here, but it's important.
Yep.
So you get really, really good. You get your 10th degree black belt, you get your blue belt, you get your whatever. If a violent, dangerous stimulus gets introduced too quickly, your survival system, your reptilian brain, will hijack your attention and do something called a startle flinch. Mm-hmm. So we've all done that where, someone goes, hey, and you go, whoa, shit, you scared because you were daydreaming, you didn't pick up on their presence. What's funny is if you're type A personality martial artist, there's a moment of embarrassment, right? You trip on the sidewalk, you're walking, you trip, and you look around to see if anyone's looking. You're taking the garbage out at 6 in the morning or 5 in the morning, and a cat or a raccoon or whatever, where you live, moves like bristles in the bushes as you're taking out, and you go, ah! And then you look around to see if any neighbor, like, first of all, everybody's a little bit embarrassed, but particularly if you like are part of this like martial art. Yes, I'm totally stoic and I'm ready for anything. We don't understand it. So how this connects to Mitchell is we didn't know this at the time because I didn't start researching startle flinch conversion until like 1987-ish. But when Mitchell grabbed the kid and had his books in his hand, when the guy started to move, although Mitchell could feel and see the attack happening, what happened was his cognitive brain was bypassed by his reptilian brain that affected a startle flinch. Now, here's the thing about the startle flinch. If your hands are free, your hands will come up to protect your head. So we see all those funny pictures and spoofs on social media where people getting hit and you see the hand coming up. Even if they get hit late, the hands come up after. That's the startle flinch response. Our hands come up to protect our head, and then the cross-extensor chain is to push away danger. A very, very critical and important part about the neuroscience and neurobiology of the startle flinch is that if you're touching something, when your body flinches, it also will contract around what it's holding. Mm-hmm. And so if you look at any of those classic photos, and maybe we can insert some after, I'll send you some links to some, like you see them all over the baseball pictures. Anybody who's holding something in their hands when they flinch, you'll see one hand doing this and one hand locked on binoculars, popcorn, bottle, pizza, whatever it is. So we didn't know this, but when Mitchell grabbed the guy's shirt, when he flinched, that changed the grip and the grip got tighter on the shirt. When he's holding his books, in other words, you can't do wax on, wax off if you got stuff in your hands. And that's an important lesson. So I don't know if you know this or if your audience knows this. My main business isn't training martial artists. It's one of the verticals in my company.
Mhm.
My main business is training law enforcement and military, and has been since 1993, when and I say this, I don't mean to be facetious, but cops and soldiers actually fight bad guys. It's not douchebag fights. It's not, what are you looking at, man? It's actually fighting bad guys. They discovered our research in the early 90s, and that's what we've been doing full time. As a result of that, I closed my schools and been doing consulting and seminars since. But my love for training and teaching martial artists never wavered. And so we have a very specific division in our company that trains, someone like yourself. And we've got like everyone in our trainer program is qualified in another martial art. And they go, wow, we need to add the psychology of fear, understanding how to manage fear, but more importantly, the neurobiology of fear. How do we get biology to work for us? Because guess what? Regardless of gender, training, or background, your biology supersedes. I created a meme that physiology supersedes physicality.
Right.
And we all get sucked into, including myself, of show me that move, show me that. We get sucked into the technique. But if you look at things from an evidence-based perspective, meaning if you're really studying violence, as I have for decades, I look at like this, where this person got murdered, this person got stabbed, this person got beaten, this person got abducted. And what you see is fear and primal gross motor movement, regardless of training or gender. You don't see technique. And so people have to recalibrate to get to their technique. And so I studied those first few seconds of an altercation. And that's where startle, flinch, spear evolved, and certainly the fear management part. But anyways, all of that, I went down a bunch of rabbit holes there. But that fight with Mitchell spawned and inspired my singular focus, looking at scenarios only. So when anyone trains with us from now on, like everything we do is what's the scenario. So there's always a Socratic connection to, why are we doing this? What's this got to do with our life? And I mentioned earlier that two things happened with this origin story. One is that was the start of my exploration of scenario training, which gave birth to, as an entrepreneur, that scenario training turned into the development of the high gear suit, which revolutionized scenario-based training around the world. To date, we've sold over 30,000 suits. We did a $17 million deal with the U.S. Army after they studied gear. 7,800 suits went to their Combatives program. It's all over the world. It just changed everything, including like from how certain people practice, like MMA ground and pound, Uriah Faber, BJ Penn, Frank Mir, Randy Couture. Our high gear suit was on the first Ultimate Fighter show. So that really, but that grew out of my scenario training in the 80s, where, growing up in Canada, we'd say, okay, we got to do scenarios. We'd have like a hockey helmet on, hockey gauntlets on, taekwondo chest guard, baseball shin guards. We look like Frankensteins, right? And we just beat the shit out of each other, videotape. And I developed probably the world's, I would say right now, after decades, this might sound grandiose to some people who don't know me, but I'm 61. I've been doing this for 43 years. I'm still one of the busiest consultants, after all these years, for all the phases that martial arts go through. We had a singular focus on making you safer. So now we have I'm reticent just to say this because it sounds obnoxious, but like the most organized approach to self-defense scenario training,
right,
where we're looking at the moral, ethical, legal, the verbal de-escalation, the neurobiology. It's not just, hey, let's get together and beat the shit out of each other and call it scenario training, which is what I used to do also in the 80s. Those are the iterations. And I look back at old videos and I go, holy shit, how did we not kill each other or create brain damage because we did some crazy shit? The second amazing thing that happened from that initial moment when Mitchell's dad said, "Hey, would you teach my son?" Was Mitchell's dad was a wealthy dude and lived in a rich area, and I was like 20 years old. Mitchell was 15. Well, Mitchell's brother Steve was like, "Dad, why does Mitch get private lessons and I don't?" Oh, okay. And suddenly it's, "Hey, can you teach Steve too?" Sure. Well, we're training outside in the front, garage area, garage doors open, and there's Derek and Richard walk by. They're two buddies. "Hey, what are you guys doing?" Literally, Paul, within about a month, I had 30 private students, all 15 and 16 years old. Now I'm 20 years old, so it's not a big, and it's not like I was 50 and they were 3 years old. There was these were all good athletes, hockey players, skiers, football players, and they were my guinea pig for 6 years. I taught, 1985, for 5 years, I worked a 40, 50-hour week for my father. And then every single day and every single night of the week, I would finish work at 5 or 6 o'clock, navigate traffic, and hit this part of Montreal, Westmount and Côte Saint Luc, and I would do private lessons 7 days a week until 1985. I said to my dad, might have been a bit earlier, but 85 is when I remember incorporating and opening my school. I said, "Okay, I'm done. This is my dream. What am I doing? I can't work 80, 90 hours a week the rest of my life." And left my father's company, opened up my place, opened up a school. But that, from 1980 to 1993, when I closed my school, I did force on force scenarios like Fight Club before Fight Club was Fight Club. We'd get together once a month and do these scenarios where we're just beating the crap out of each other, but in a structured way. There was a scenario, there was a moral, ethical, legal de-escalation phase. There was always going to be a fight. We made that happen, but we made people practice situational awareness and de-escalation. Anyone tracking defund the police and all the bullshit going on around the world right now knows that de-escalation is the biggest thing. If you trained with me in the 80s, you were taught nonviolent postures. You were taught about body language, tone, and words being the 3 factors that influence communication. So we were doing this like in the 80s before it was a thing, 30 years later. Our whole ballistic microfight approach to the scenario training was refined in there. So out of the 80s evolved the SPEAR system, spontaneous protection enabling accelerated response, the study of the start of flinch. The No Fear program, which was originally cerebral self-defense, the mental edge, just understanding how to kind of self-coach, manage our inner voice. I hope I don't strike out. I hope I don't strike out is not motivational, right? You don't motivate through a negative. You suck. Don't screw up, right? And high gear. So the 3 things that I went on and I didn't realize it. I didn't go, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I want to be like, a consulting company. That wasn't it. I was just following my love, following my passion. But high gear, No Fear, SPEAR, and here we are 43 years later.
Wow, that's incredible. Just sort of, you do what you love and it just kind of creates the path for you. Can you take us through, because you evolved the scenario-based training. Can you take us through kind of an example of like, how is that done? Like, sure. Like how involved is this scenario-based training?
So it depends where you start and what you're looking to do. And we got different courses. So like if you come to we have a 1-day course called Be Your Own Bodyguard. And whenever people hear that, martial artists flip out, right? Because their unconscious bias is, if I said to you, can you learn Krav Maga in a day? You'd go, no, I've been training for X amount of years. I got these many levels to get to. Could you learn jiu-jitsu in a day? No. And if somebody said to a martial artist, hey, I'm going to take this 1-day self-defense course. If you're a martial artist, you go, you're getting ripped off. That's bullshit. Because people are confusing learning the principles of personal safety, situational awareness, de-escalation, and if push comes to shove, how to be a human weapon, how to access your human weapon skills, and just stun and run. And So we figured out how to do that. And we tell people, like, don't confuse learning a martial art and then applying those complex motor skill sets in a self-defense scenario with learning self-defense. In the same way, just to make this metaphor clear, you can take a 4-hour emergency first aid course, learn how to put on a tourniquet, learn to do mouth-to-mouth CPR and some basic first aid. In 4 hours, you have life-saving skills, but you would never confuse that with being a doctor. So being a doctor is like getting a black belt. So I always share that there. And now let me tie that to self-defense. Your question about scenario-based training. Somebody who goes through a Bureau and Bodyguard course is learning scenario-based training. We're talking to them about, these are the things you need to look for at an ATM. This is what you need to be thinking about when you get out of your car and you're parked in an underground parking lot. Here's what you should stand in an elevator and things you should do if you get a bad feeling. So we're teaching people how to trust their instincts, their intuition, and use their intelligence. We're teaching people how to look at the psychology of certain types of threats. What do bad guys want? What do bad guys not want? And when you educate people like that, it's all done through a Socratic approach, i.e. scenario-based. So that the simplest level is just suddenly talking about context, Paul. Right. So think about this. If back in the 80s, when we thought we were learning self-defense, we were practicing jabs and crosses and hooks and bong sao and lop sao and tan sao and takedowns and arm bars. We were doing what's called block-based training. It wasn't connected to a scenario. The scenario started with, here's a bad guy. You guys can't see this. There's a mic cover. That's the bad guy. That's my focus pad. It was, okay, hit, boom, do this, move, do this, move, do this. Whatever it was, do your moves. And we didn't have context. This is what happened to Mitchell. Mitchell lost his fight because in the confrontation, he had no context. So he didn't know what his emotional, psychological system was going to do. He had no verbal de-escalation strategy. He had never been taught how to use what we call choice speech, tactical talking, is a cute little term, tactical talking to facilitate a defuse, i.e. de-escalation, which is morally and ethically and legally sound, but then also how to use that same tactical talking to shift your psychological gears if you realize, oh shit, this is going to evolve and erupt into a physical fight. Am I ready? Mm-hmm. And so all of that is, I classify as scenario-based training now. Everything we do, if I say, if you say to me, hey, show me something from the Spear Systems ground fighting, I would never fall to the ground and go, so let's say you're here, you can do this and grab the ankle. I would go, why are we on the ground? How did we get there? Let's talk that through. Because every time you have that conversation, you are creating a storyline, a narrative that helps your perception speed. Now listen carefully to this, everybody. If we improve our perception speed, meaning our metacognitive understanding, meaning I understand the bigger picture, not the 10,000 foot view, not the 20,000 foot view, not even the 30,000 foot view. I understand the relationship between self-awareness and situational awareness. Mm-hmm. Conventionally, everyone says, hey, head on a swivel, get off the X. Situational awareness is everything. But then there's no drills for it. So we go, hey guys, remember, head on a swivel out there. What are you looking for? And then when you see it, what do you do? So we get into all of that in our conversations. So now what we've done is we've improved your perception speed because we explained to you, why did you get knocked to the ground? Why weren't you able to do something before? How come you couldn't abort this or intercept this? And now you're here. And what that does is that gives you a reason and an understanding and context for why you're practicing. That's scenario-based training at its purest level. And it can go all the way up to putting on our high gear suit. And I've done stuff with certain units and organizations where we throw somebody in a trunk of a car, drive them somewhere, open the car, and then tell them, you are not allowed to go to a secondary crime scene. When that trunk opens, you need to fight. You need to start moving. So it can get as evolved as how do I break out of zip ties and duct tape and then start a fight here? How do I do a gun disarm and turn it on somebody? So certain government agencies that we've done stuff with, the scenario training goes all the way from understanding the connection between self-awareness and situational awareness in the fear loop. Now, when we all the way up to, okay, what would be the worst case scenario skill set? And you go, well, if I was kidnapped and taken here, that would suck. Okay, so we've got to build our training to how did you get captured and what happened there. So you can imagine all of that. And a reason I wanted to share that scope there is because if we say scenario-based training, depending on who you are listening to this call, that can mean different things to you. Words are iconic, right? So, if I always make a joke, if I put the word run up on a screen, that means something different to you if you're a track and field athlete, and it means something very different if you're a politician, right? So you can look at it. So what does scenario-based training mean? For me, it means that everything we're going to practice has to serve one thing. It has to enhance your survivability. And for it to enhance your survivability, we need to ask and answer the question, what has this got to do with me, my life, in my routine? Who am I? Am I a soccer mom or am I a police officer? Am I a self-defense instructor or am I a student in a self-defense class? What are we practicing? What are we teaching? Now, that was probably a more metaphysical answer than you were hoping, or maybe your audience was. But there is, like, if you came to we've got a high gear scenario instructor course where it's like, how do you put the suit on? How do you do the threshold drill, which is finding a balance between power and speed, right? You need, the training needs to be safe. It needs to be scientific. How do you debrief? How do you create a scenario? How do you reverse engineer a scenario using, there's a course, we have actually a course going on this week in North Carolina, one of my teams down there. This one's for active duty only. So we've got, Marine Corps present. We've got law enforcement. We've got different subsets of law enforcement in there. And this course is called Ebsd, Evidence-Based Scenario Training. And they take 3, sometimes 4, depending on the size of the class, real surveillance videos. And then they're taught to reverse engineer them using the protocol that I designed. How do you identify a primary initiation attack? What are the pre-contact cues there? And then almost like a butterfly effect, they replicate the exact thing. So if somebody was shot or captured or hit, they replicate the whole thing. And then they start injecting the spear system. How do we, there's a drill we have called the ECT, emotional climatization training, where you identify the auditory, visual, and tactile pre-contact cues, right? So think about this. If I said to you, what is the number one Krav Maga block for a right hand?
To be a 360 or a parry.
Okay. So just show me what that looks like on the screen here.
So if it's just a straight punch, so
like someone goes to hit you.
Yeah.
Okay. So a parry. So we would stand up like this. I'd be in a fighting stance, and then I'd throw a punch, and you do the movement. Let's do that again, right? And of course, there's a slight delay here, right? Because of this. What we would do is we would go like, I call this the Star Trek model. Fights, nobody beams down in a fighting stance. No. With you in your fighting stance. You turned around at the ATM, putting your money away and your hands in your pocket, and there's a guy there going, I'll take that from you. And you're like, what the fuck are you talking about? And then all of a sudden he sucker punches you. So we do things as an example. If you get ready to do the parry again, our scenario would be like this. So get in your ready stance, and I'd be here like this. I'd be like, hey motherfucker, what's going on? What's that Krav Maga shirt? You Krav, wow, and the shot, like, and you could see if I inject a little dialogue and a little body English and a little bit of like a 3 seconds of a role player, that totally changes your reaction time. Now, every one of your students and everyone listening needs to understand that. So I did this research in the 80s where if I add dialogue to a physical training session, I totally mess with neuromuscular communication, signal speed between awareness and neuron. So your neurons, Paul, your neurons are taught when Tony moves, parry. When Tony moves, parry. And then I go to you, get ready to go.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm here like this. Okay. Are you ambidextrous? Like, could you do both sides?
Yep.
So I just punched you in the face, right, while I was talking, super, super slow. And it's a trick. Anyone can do that. But all I did is I got you to think, are you ambidextrous? The drill hasn't started yet, right? So this observation studying violence, fear, and aggression is that bad guys don't come up to us and go, are you ready? Yeah. In fact, what they often do is they'll behaviorally distract. They know what works, how to set somebody up for a sucker punch and what have you. And we need to understand that. But the most important observation was this, in terms of, again, this is just a scenario-based training tip, is if we add dialogue into the practice, we actually change our reaction time. Mm-hmm. It degrades. And what we want, what we all work on as martial artists is getting faster and faster and faster. But, like having that sort of thing, observation, there became part of our whole scenario training structure, where we have a videotape for anyone that wants to explore it. It's called Be a Good Bad Guy. It's just understanding, just like some simple tips on how to role play better, more effectively. Because I always make this joke, I alluded to this early on, that, there's so much infighting in martial arts and backstabbing in politics. I used to end a lot of my blog posts online and certain podcasts going, don't hate me, hate the bad guy. Like, I'm the good guy. I'm trying to make people safer. But a lot of people look at, oh, that guy's the threat. He's teaching something else. And my goal is just to make people safer. And we've got hundreds of affiliates around the world who are Taekwondo experts, Krav Maga experts, Jiu-Jitsu experts. They've got their passion, their love, and their system, but they recognize, you know what? A couple of things. One is, honestly, if you've got integrity, there's something missing. If there's not something missing and you recognize it, I can save you decades by training with me and my team, because I did all this homework and I'm going, here you go. Here's a fucking silver platter. Can I swear on your show? Too late, right?
Oh yeah, no problem. No problem.
Here's your silver platter. Here, I just turned decades into days. Study this stuff and start practicing it. But anyways, off on a tangent. That's so I don't know if that answered there's so much structure to how do we do, scenario training, to like literally if I don't know if I can say this because it was a military group, but there was a particular group I was working with overseas that their personnel were seeing, because of a certain indigenous region, a certain type of attack was happening. And these guys didn't have access to their normal equipment because they were undercover. So we reverse engineered the attack, and by replicating it, we were able to improve perception speed, which improved reaction time, which gave them a fighting chance. Mm-hmm. Because what they did is they now had blueprints in their mind of how these attacks could happen. Right. Nice. So, scenario-based training is the untapped frontier for everybody in anything, particularly self-defense, but anything in life. If you're a doctor, if you're a lawyer, if you're a student driver, you're doing scenario-based training, right? You go to get your driver's license, that's scenario-based training. What would you do here? Park here. It's not like you are really parking, but you're doing scenarios and someone's watching you. So not a great example, but you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Everyone in the martial arts self-defense world, if your practice goes beyond the meditative quality, the cultural quality, value, the community value, and you want to know, would I be able to protect myself or my family? You absolutely need to explore scenario-based training.
Do you take is it like when you do your scenario-based training, is there a progressive? Like you start with sort of like lower level scenarios and then get really complex?
They're never complex. The way I've broken it down is very much like, like Lego blocks.
Okay.
You wouldn't start somebody with a 3-on-1. You'd start them with a 1-on-1.
Mhm.
And then if somebody said, what about multiple assailants? You wouldn't jump up to 11-on-1. You'd go, okay, let's talk about the 1-on-1 issues. And then we have a maxim in our multiple assailant training is never let the math beat you. 3 people is just one person 3 times. And if you think about it wrong, it can overwhelm you. If I go, there's 3 guys, they're 200 pounds, I weigh 200 pounds, that's 400 pounds extra. They got 400 pounds of me. They've got 4 extra arms than me. They got 4 extra legs than me. They got 2 more brains. I can let the math beat me.
Mm-hmm.
I could look at them and go, well, there's more targets for me, right? I'm being facetious, of course, knowing, not being cavalier about having to fight, 3 people. But there's a building block progression that we take people through. I think the important distinction is everything we do is brain-based, based on neuroscience. And that makes it easier to augment skill, because what I might teach a tier 1 operator is at a certain level the same thing I'm going to teach your wife.
Mm-hmm.
Like the fact that this guy's got a gun and body armor and is now, jumping out of an airplane doesn't change the fact that he needs effective situational awareness. He needs to regulate his state. That's his self-awareness. He may have to de-escalate something. He may have to hit a nonviolent posture. He may have to manage fear. He may have to, startle, flinch, and convert. So what I've looked at is what connects us all, regardless of profession or gender or occupation. And then, and this is part of the craft, Paul, is how I organize and effectively articulate is part of the art and science of teaching. Starting with, the different models that we've created that say, drop your scenario in here, mm-hmm. identify the primary initiation attack. That is how does this fight start? Now do our emotional climate training around that, which is how do we identify the auditory, visual, and tactile cues? Now superimpose our timeline of violence over that. So that's a whole other training section that we teach people: D1, D2, D3, detect and avoid, defuse and de-escalate and defend. Understanding the timeline of violence, that changes perception speed, which improves our reaction time. And then we go, okay, got it. Now it's almost like this. You're either a handyman, a carpenter, or an architect. So, if you're just a handyman and all you can do is like put up shelves, and I call you over to go, I go, Paul, I need a shelf in my garage here. You go, got it. Ding, 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 ding. Yeah. I go, you know what? That wall keeps on cracking there. So could you change the plaster and repaint that? You go, I'll do it, but it's a shitty job. You need to get like a carpenter to do that. Oh, okay. The carpenter comes in and he fixes it. And then the wall, like a year later, cracks again. And I need to repaint it. And I go, dude, I don't want to pay you for this again. But like this cracked again and I need to repaint it. And he goes, he says, I don't know. Maybe there's something wrong with the foundation here. And that's why the paint. So suddenly I got to bring an architect in. And he goes, yeah, you got a problem in the foundation here. So this moisture comes in here. That's why that keeps shifting. And that, in other words, what I'm getting at is if you're teaching self-defense, you need to be educated like an architect, not a handyman. And there's a lot of people who do scenario training like a handyman, right? Let's get our gloves on. Let's surround each other. And now it's you like you see videos of that. Like guys just fucking wailing the shit at each other and going, okay, that's not morally and ethically, legally preparing somebody for a self-defense situation. If you start the confrontation in the headlock, or you start the confrontation with the hands up and we go, you're not teaching anything about situational awareness or verbal de-escalation. So the progression is very clear, and it's something, again, like I didn't just come up with this like in 1982, right? It was iterations and iterations. You think about it. If you read Malcolm Gladwell's, Tipping Point, and you get into and you start studying the original research of Erickson from Europe on what constitutes mastery, whether you believe in the 10,000 hours or 10,000 reps metaphor, there's a logic and an awareness that says, if I do something 10,000 times, I'm going to get pretty good at it. Now, having said that, you might get really good at the wrong thing, right? So you got to look at, it's one of our famous memes is be careful what you practice. You might get really good at the wrong thing. And that's not a knock on other martial arts. It's that people don't understand neuroscience, neurobiology, neurons, myelinization, and how the brain learns. Because you can predispose yourself to do something you didn't want to do by how much you train it.
Yeah, exactly. And so where does your no fear kind of fit in with like your spear training model?
Yeah, cool question, because no fear evolved the latest.
Mm-hmm.
Although it was very much part of the 80s. We always, like, if you look at my original Panther Productions videos that came out in 1986, the first video was called Cerebral Self-Defense, The Mental Edge. I had an audio that came out in 1993, Cerebral Self-Defense, The Mental Edge. It was, fear management was always part of our training. And remember when your first question, I always said I lived with fear my whole life. So I unconsciously created experiences and scenarios and events that forced me to confront and manage my fear. And then I would try to decode what that was. And the serendipity of this was that I had all these guinea pigs, right? All my students. And I go, try this, think this. And then they'd hit it. And I go, holy shit, this works for other people. It actually worked better for other people than it did for me. Because I was creating it with the fear that it wouldn't work. You understand the weird serendipity and irony of that? I was the guy that was afraid, going, I hope this works. And they were the person going, looking at me as the expert, going, Coach, what should I be doing here? And I go, I want you to go in there and I want you to think this. I remember this kid I was coaching for a kickboxing match. He was fighting one of Jean-Yves Theriault's students. Right? They're like in a kickboxer. Jean-Yves Theriault, one of the greatest kickboxers in the world. Yeah. And he was all nervous. And I said to him, I said, Oliver. And I did this like 5 minutes before the fight. I went through this sequence with him. And he went out there and like won fight of the night, won a decision. They beat the shit out of each other, like just blocking them. But he started off going, Coach, I'm morally scared. This is like one of Theriault's students. And I knew if he went in there thinking that way, of course he's going to lose, because the weight of fear will make your legs feel 50 pounds each, So and everything I did, boom, just snapped him out. He went in there and fought like a friggin' one. I have so many stories like that, because if you call me up and you go, Tony, I heard your fear management action, I'm really afraid of this. And I go, well, here's how you need to think about it. And this would be the optimal strategy. Well, because you want the answer, you go for it and then it works. Whereas for me, I'm starting with this hypothesis. I wonder if this will work. I sure hope it works. I have doubt, but this seems logical. In other words, it's really an experiment for me, but it's not an experiment for the student.
Right.
They don't see it as the experiment. They're like, Coach, what should I do in this round? Hey, Stato's outside and hit him here. Yeah, but what if he hits me? Well, think about this, right? And then it's like, okay, got it, right? Because they need that inner coach. Again, the mind navigates the body. And so where does no fear fit in? It's always been there, but no fear started off as cerebral self-defense. And then it really evolved in the last 4 to 5 years, particularly after I really started studying neuroscience and found out that everything, literally every drill and concept in the 80s that was inspired by intuition and just my desire to help the student get through a scenario, was based on neuroscience, which was crazy. Like decades before, the MRI showed this part of the brain to do this and that. So that was really crazy, weird validation, and it inspired me so much that I really went deeper into that, and then said, you know what? There's no such thing as no fear, N-O fear, but there is a way to get to no fear, K-N-O-W. And if I change my relationship with fear, I can change my life. Yes. And so now fear management is placed almost where, if you remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs, at the bottom tier is always survival. So if somebody looks at the Blauer training systems pyramid, I tell people, if they go, where should I start? I go, start with fear. Because even if I show you some cool, sexy martial art move, if you have too much fear, you won't access it. You've got to manage the fear. In fact, that's one of the lines out of the course related to our self-defense, is that people who manage their fear manage to fight. Those who manage their fear manage to fight. And that's true across every industry, every community, every event, every challenge. The people who don't manage their fear either sabotage their success, don't show up, or, and if somehow they survived it, it was because the cavalry showed up or the bad guy was so bad, like something happened, but it wasn't because they managed their fear. The true story of courage and bravery is found in studying fear management. You can't be brave if you're not afraid.
There's nothing to fear but fear itself.
Right.
Yeah.
As the cliche goes, you hear that when you're young, and you hear that, and like you've heard that 1,000 times in your life. I did too. You go, yes, that's true. And then you're like, what the fuck does that even mean? Or we know what it means, but it's like, it's academic.
Yeah.
It's academic until you're living it.
Mm-hmm. So, are you still doing the Zoom training for people?
Oh yeah.
All right. So
that's huge.
So if people wanted to train with you, they can get a online membership, and you have different Zoom memberships.
Yeah. So we call it the Garage Gym. It's kind of a boring name. I wish there was a funny story about the name. Is when the lockdown happened, most of my business, I said law enforcement, military, and these are I'm not going to mention the price of the courses, but some of them are contract courses, and they're 20, 30 cops in a class. All that shut down, and literally within a few months, I was losing hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I was sitting in my office going, "Holy shit! I could lose my entire company. I could lose my business. This is awful." Fortunately, I know this fear management expert, and I consulted with him, and I was like, "Dude, you're going to lose everything if you don't get your shit together." And I was talking to a buddy of mine who's in the fitness space, and he said, he works out every day and has 150 people working out with him on a Zoom call. He said, "Aren't you like a famous self-defense guy? Would anyone want to train with you?" So I wrote a very transparent letter to my newsletter list, and I said, "Listen, here's the reality." And the beautiful, and I love the word serendipity, is I started in my garage. I started in people's garages. And then here I was going to do group classes on Zoom in my garage, which was insane. And I had 100 people sign up right away. Now we've got hundreds around the world, Australia, Germany, Spain, all over the world. And we did class 280 last Thursday, 280 consecutive classes. What we're doing in there, fear management, multiple assailant, weapons, tactical. We have people losing 20, 30 pounds. A lot of it for some people is just a chance to train with me. They'd heard about me. They're going, is this guy full of shit or is he for real? Okay, come in. Some people, it's like a real community. I log in. We set it up so that anyone could log in early. When I log in at the time because we do it live 5 times a week. So we do the class 5 times a week, but they're all recorded. So it's like the Netflix for self-defense and Netflix for spear. And so you can watch as many times as you want, but it's a true community. I log in and there's already like 20 people talking about their weekend and what they were doing and what they're working on and stuff like that. So it's grown into something crazy. It's where I started. And so the name Garage Gym kind of has like a deeper meaning. And if you look at the history of the name, it comes from France, and garage was a place of shelter, a place where people would gather in times of danger, storms, a risk. So it's kind of got this metaphoric meaning.
Perfect. Well, Coach, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day and to speak with us and impart your knowledge. I hope everybody got something out of that. And if you want to check out Mr. Blauer's online course, train with him, go to his seminars, I'm sure he would appreciate that.
Yeah, I would love that. Hey, Paul, thank you very much. Congrats on the new baby, and my best to you, and thanks for reaching out.
Thank you very much, sir.
Take care. Stay safe.